They're pretty much the match made in heaven.
She was desperately in love.
They're the little stars of Savannah.
From Academy Award-winning director Robert Redford, the story of a hero with a broken spirit.
Savannah needs you!
A woman with a broken heart.
10 years and not one single solitary word from you? You don't do that to someone you love.
And a stranger who helped them find a second chance.
Bagger Vance, the name?
Will Smith, Matt Damon, Charlize Theron, The Legend of Bagger Vance.
Welcome.
Do?
Well.
Watched.
With Robert Redford as the director and Will Smith, Matt Damon, and Charlize Theron as the leads, The Legend of Bagger Vance seemed to have all the ingredients needed for a commercial and critical hit. However, despite having this A-list cast as well as a novel-based screenplay, the movie failed to earn back even half its budget at the box office, and additionally, it received mixed reviews from the critics and audience. Greetings, y'all. It's your Knock Peter Mata, and welcome to the first episode in this well-watched series where I'll be diving into movies and even TV shows that I've watched and hopefully provide some informative as well as entertaining commentary on it. Since a lot of you know me for the Golf Stories content, I figured a good way to introduce and transition to this series would be with a golf movie. Anyways, let's get back to The Legend of Bagger Vance, and hopefully today we can answer that title question of why it was not a hit. So let's first get some more background info on The Legend of Bagger Vance. The movie was made in 2000 and was released to theaters in November of that year. It's rated PG-13 and has a runtime of just over 2 hours. In terms of the studios who were involved in its creation and distribution, we have DreamWorks for the US and 20th Century Fox for international audiences. As the movie indicates, it is set and actually filmed in Savannah, Georgia, as well as Jekyll Island, Georgia. Many scenes are also filmed in South Carolina. Most specifically, the golf course footage is filmed in several locations across that state, including at Cougars Point, Colleton River Plantation, and Kiowa Island, where of course we just saw the 2021 PGA Championship. As far as the budget and box office goes, it was estimated that $80 million was spent on making The Legend of Bagger Vance, and as I said in the intro, it bombed at the box office, so it didn't even make half of it back. In total, the film only made about $39.4 million. Of course, as far as the cast and crew, we already mentioned that Robert Redford was the director, and the main actors included Will Smith, Matt Damon, and Charlize Theron. I also have to mention some of the supporting cast too, because it's quite a solid list with Bruce McGill, Joel Gretsch, first-time actor J. Michael Moncrief, and in his last movie, Mr. Jack Lemmon. There are a few more familiar faces, but obviously judging by just those names, you can clearly see this cast and crew is stacked with talent. And to put more context into it, I mean, this was right in the middle of some amazing runs for Will Smith and Matt Damon. Obviously, Will coming off the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to do Bad Boys, Independence Day, Men in Black, and Enemy of the State. Unfortunately, Wild Wild West isn't in that great run. But still, what a great run he was on. And then for Matt Damon, shoot, you could start from Courage Under Fire, to The Rainmaker, to his Oscar-winning Good Will Hunting, to Saving Private Ryan, to Rounders, to Dogma, and to the talented Mr. Ripley. So these guys are absolutely pumping out some great stuff and basically just printing money at that time. So anyways, that's a little background for the movie. Let's get a little more into the writing, the plot, and the themes of the film. And just so you know, I'll be going in full detail here, so this is your spoiler alert warning if you want to watch the film before listening to this. So as I briefly mentioned in the intro, The Legend of Bagger Vance movie is based on the 1995 fiction novel of the same name by Stephen Pressfield. The novel was adapted to screenplay by Jeremy Levin, who became more known for his screenplay in The Notebook. So getting into the plot now, the movie opens with Jack Lemmon, who plays the older version of this character named Hardy Greaves. As Hardy is playing the opening hole, he begins having a heart attack. According to him, it was a 6-1, and it was also not the first time he's had one on the golf course. Anyways, as he's falling to the ground, he begins contemplating his life and his love for the game of golf, which started during his childhood. So it flashes back to a younger Hardy, played by J. Michael Moncrief, in 1928 Savannah, Georgia, where we see his idolization of Savannah's golfing star, Randolph Juna, played by Matt Damon. We basically go on a Randolph Juna montage, and we see that he has a beautiful girlfriend in Adele Invengorden, who's played by Charlize Theron. They really show him to be this toast of the town, and as a man who's got the world at his fingertips. However, he then gets called to war and be the leader of the men of Savannah. So the movie moves forward and we see Randolph on the battlefield as a captain, and as the battle progresses, we see that it's not going as planned. By the end of it, Randolph is standing alone, and we see his entire company has pretty much just been wiped out. While apparently he receives the Medal of Honor, he's traumatized by the experience and returns home quietly without much fanfare, not even reaching out to his girlfriend Adele. The movie then moves forward and it reaches the Great Depression, and we see that many in Savannah, including Hardy and his father, are out of their previous jobs. As for Adele, we see that her father had just built and opened a brand new golf course called Crew Island. Obviously, with the Great Depression, the course had a disastrous grand opening. As a result, Adele's father is ashamed of this failure, and unfortunately, he takes his own life. Soon thereafter, the city, led by Judge Nescalusa, is looking to take the property back from Adele. However, trying to realize her father's dreams, she refuses to sell. Instead, she promises to host a grand exhibition match between the best golfers at that time, Bobby Jones and Walter Hagen. These two characters were played by Joel Gretsch and Bruce McGill respectively, and I have to say as a golf fan, I think they did a wonderful job bringing these two legends to life. So Adele actually does get them to agree to play in the match, and the city is cool with this. However, they do want to improve it by having a player from Savannah play in the match as well to represent the city. After a few names are thrown around, Hardy recommends Randolph Juna. While there is a lot of doubt about the recommendation, the people eventually cheer on Hardy to go find him. Hardy does eventually find him, but he's not in a great state. He's a heavy drinker, a gambler, and just seems to be living with no purpose. After much jostling with Hardy, the city, and even Adele, Randolph does indeed agree to play in the match. The way he comes to this decision is when he hits balls in the middle of the night, trying to find his swing. While he's doing that, a mysterious traveler named Bagger Vance, played by Will Smith, randomly comes out of the darkness to talk with Randolph. They talk, and there's something, mystical about him. So after Bagger gives a bit of a pep talk to him, Randolph does agree to let Bagger be his caddy for the match. When this highly hyped match starts, Jones and Hagen play well in their own distinct ways, and it results in them being neck and neck through the first round. Randolph, on the other hand, is completely out of it in more ways than one. His game is not there, his mind and heart are not in it, and he's pretty much just out there sulking. Letting it all unfold, Bagger slowly starts imparting little nuggets of advice to Randolph about finding his quote-unquote authentic swing. While Randolph at first was defiant to Bagger's advice, he slowly starts to listen in and becomes more interested as to what Bagger is talking about. As they continue to talk, Randolph does indeed start to find his swing. Basically entering the zone, he closes the gap in round 2 and 3 and even hits a hole-in-one in the process. As he continues to gain more confidence in his game, he also starts to find himself, as he and Adele even rekindle the romance. Getting to the 4th and final round, Randolph is in full confidence mode, walking with swagger and cracking jokes with the crowd. However, this ultimately leads him to becoming overconfident as he tries and fails to hit a damn near impossible shot after Bagger advised him not to. It results in a disastrous hole that once again put him behind Jones and Hagen. As the match seems to be slipping away, Randolph is losing his grip again and begins having flashbacks of his traumatic war experience. This is when Bagger gives him his last piece of advice to let his burdens go and remember his game. With Bagger's comforting words, Randolph composed himself and pulled back to a tie with Jones and Hagen going to the last hole. In the fairway of that last hole, Randolph moves a piece of grass near his ball, and inadvertently this causes the ball to move. After some contest whether it moved or not, Randolph has the integrity to reassert that the ball indeed moved, and as a result he ends up calling a penalty on himself. Just as a BTW, this exact type of situation actually happened to Bobby Jones in real life. Since Bagger sees that Randolph has truly grown and found himself again, he decides that Randolph doesn't need him anymore. He hands the caddying duties to Hardy, who's been around to hear all of his advice, and with that, he walks off before watching the match finish. Despite the penalty, Randolph does have a putt to tie Jones and Hagen for the match. Improbable as it seemed, he ends up making it and the crowd goes crazy. As we hear the crowd's reaction, we see Bagger walking off and dancing on the beach, leaving mysteriously just as he came. In the end, the movie shows a joyous and changed Randolph who has a new outlook on life. We see he and Adele are back together again, doing the thing they liked most about their relationship, dancing. As for Hardy, the movie flashes forward back to old Hardy on the golf course, and in the distance he sees Bagger calling him. He listens to Bagger's beckoning and heads his direction. And that's it. That was basically the plot of The Legend of Bagger Vance. As for the themes of the movie, we heard a little bit about it in the plot, but essentially the biggest theme is about one finding their quote-unquote authentic swing. Now this is a movie with golf in it, so on the surface level, finding one's authentic swing sounds like someone looking to find their golf swing again. However, it goes deeper than that. Finding one's authentic swing is basically a metaphor for finding oneself in the midst of adversity. Bagger's advice to Randolph Juna is that he and he alone must go on the journey to find himself. He must find his place in the quote-unquote field, which is the game of golf, but even deeper, it's life itself. He has to cease all the self-pitying and regain his belief in his life and soul. Now, if all this sounds like it has religious overtones to it, then you're correct. Because the novel that the movie is based on is loosely based on something else, that being the Hindu sacred text, Bhagavad Gita. The movie even uses similar names. In that text, the warrior hero Arjuna refuses to fight, and the god Krishna appears as Bhagavan to help Arjuna follow the path of the warrior hero that he was meant to take. So that was the main plot and theme of the movie. Let's now get into the reaction and review from critics and audiences. As I'm sure a lot of you do, you first look at the IMDb ratings and Rotten Tomatoes scores. So let's take a look at that. First, looking on IMDb, the ratings averaged out to 6.7 stars out of 10, so not particularly bad, just above average. And on Rotten Tomatoes, users gave it a 43% rotten on the tomato meter, and the audience gave it a 65% on the audience score. So slightly harsher on Rotten Tomatoes than on IMDb. So let's see what some of these reviewers had to say about the movie, starting with some positive ones. Famous movie critic Roger Ebert was one of those who enjoyed it. Giving it 3.5 stars out of 4, here's a small excerpt of what he said in his review of it. Quote, "Look how silky this movie is, and how completely in command of its tone. Robert Redford's The Legend of Bagger Vance could be a movie about prayer, music, or mathematics, because it's really about finding yourself at peace with the thing you do best. Most of the movie is about an epic golf tournament, but it is not a sports movie in any conventional sense. It is the first Zen movie about golf." Another positive reviewer, David Anson from Newsweek, said, quote, "Tonally reminiscent of The Natural and Field of Dreams, lushly appointed and shot in burnished golden tones. This is the sort of movie in which a great golf shot is accompanied by the In Paradisum section of Fauré's Requiem. If that sounds like your cup of spiritual tea, Bagger Vance serves it up with extra lumps of sugar." So that was a few positive examples, and as you can see, there are definitely people out there who enjoyed this movie. However, the sentiment is slightly split, so let's see what some reviewers didn't particularly like about it. Reen Rodriguez of the Miami Herald said, quote, "Redford is so fascinated with the mystical qualities of the novel's premise, he doesn't realize how anemic the tale really is." And Michael Wilmington of the Chicago Tribune said, quote, "Though it's sweet and likable to a fault, it's also a movie that never seems heartfelt or deep." So that was just a couple examples where people didn't care for it, and there are many others who say something pretty similar to those too. In addition, the film also got some heat, and I won't say the actual word here, but for basically using the magical black friend stereotype, and also for glossing over the issues of racism during the period the movie is set in. So yeah, like I said earlier, the movie had very mixed reviews. As for what I thought of it, I personally like the movie for what it is, a feel-good drama about life and golf with some of my favorite actors. As it is, I'd probably give it a B+ for overall grade. Yes, it has its faults, and I know some golfers don't like it much and criticize Matt Damon's swing, but I thought his swing was fine and the golf action wasn't that big of a problem. I thought all the actors did a decent job with the material they had. Matt Damon and Charlize Theron had solid chemistry, and honestly I thought Will Smith shined and did a great job as Bagger Vance. Now I guess it's a bit biased coming from me, who is a big Will Smith fan, but I really thought some of his career best work is in this movie. It's a role that he's not normally in. Obviously he typically does comedy and action, and you get a little bit of his funny charisma here, but it's done in a very subtle way. In this role, he's very toned down here, and his delivery on some of those spiritual monologues were top notch. In the hands of a lesser actor, I don't think it hits as good. I do think him in that role, which we're not normally used to seeing him in, affects how audience viewed it because some might not have bought into a more subtle Will Smith performance like I did. Plus, I do think age played a factor for the role of Bagger Vance. I think while Will did a great job with it, I think it comes off better from an older actor. Obviously, Morgan Freeman, who was previously slated to be Bagger, would have been ideal, but that would still bring in the race issues that we discussed earlier. I guess to avoid that, Robert Redford himself could have just been Bagger, and I'm sure it would have worked out well. Either way, I thought the acting in this movie was not the problem. I think ultimately answering that title question of why it was not a commercial and critical hit for a lot of people was because of the plot. So let's get into more detail on how the plot could have been improved. Like I said, I personally enjoyed this movie for what it was. As y'all see with my golf stories content, I love romanticizing the game of golf and tying it to life because you can really do that with golf. And I think the plot and themes do a strong job of articulating that here. I certainly as a golfer can buy in and relate to the messages. So those elements of the movie are good and should definitely stay. Now I will say sometimes with golf movies, there's a lot of over-explaining about golf, and you kind of get that here with certain golf rules or just introducing the character of Bobby Jones. Basically, they're trying to explain everything to the audience, and that creates sometimes clunky dialogue. In general, I did think there was some over-narration in this movie and trying to spell out everything to the audience. I know one of the biggest criticisms is that a lot of people struggle to care about these characters. I think if they just let the characters develop naturally and have the audience make their own interpretations, then it could have came off a little better. Also, there were some tonal shifts that I thought they could have tightened up a bit, because you would get one scene where it's silly and light, especially with the Jones and Higgins scenes, and then like seconds later you would have Will Smith and Matt Damon going deep spiritual and serious. I think they could have balanced those out a little better. The romance between Randolph and Adele could have also been tightened up a bit. As I said, I thought Matt Damon and Charlize Theron had good chemistry, but there really wasn't much to work with because some of their scenes just seemed a little forced. As a result, it made the romance story seem sort of tacked on rather than being an integral part of the story. Now a lot of these probably seem to be nitpicking, but if they wanted to keep the story intact how it is, then these were the biggest things I saw that they could have improved. At the end of the day, if they really wanted this movie to resonate better, I think they needed to rewrite some of the core elements of the story. I understand they were going by the novel and actually did a pretty good job doing it. However, for a story like this to truly resonate with a mass audience, it needs to be more relatable, and the main character's underdog story needs to be more sharply written. And when I say main character, I'm talking about Randolph Jr., which is actually another problem I found with this movie. The title of this movie is named after Bagger, yet he's not even in half of the movie basically, and it's more about Randolph Jr.'s journey. But anyways, back to the point. I know some rightfully compare this movie to Robert Redford's previous works in The Natural and A River Runs Through It, but I'd like to compare it more closely to movies that came out after it that did a better job of making it relatable to audiences. Those two movies being 2003's Seabiscuit and 2005's The Greatest Game Ever Played. Seabiscuit did better financially, and The Greatest Game Ever Played is, I'd say, more favorably viewed out of the two golf movies. Some complain that The Legend of Bagger Vance is a boring movie, and in general golf is a boring topic for a movie, especially if you're trying to make a dramatic one that appeals to a mass audience. They say it's a tough task to get people who don't know anything about golf to relate to it. However, I think this is where Seabiscuit and The Greatest Game Ever Played sort of prove that notion wrong. Obviously, Seabiscuit is about horse racing and tying it to life. Well, just like golf, not everyone knows horse racing. Yet Seabiscuit showed that you could capture the drama and feel-good aspects of a sport that the masses don't necessarily know about. Honestly, I think if you're able to tell it right, you can make a movie everyone will enjoy, no matter the topic. As for The Greatest Game Ever Played, the themes and elements in that movie were kept a little bit more focused without over-textualizing with narration and clunky dialogue. And again, it made for a compelling, dramatic, and feel-good film that the masses enjoyed. For both of those movies, the main characters were more relatable because they were underdogs who either lost everything, were characterized as a misfit, were passed by newer times, or who were fighting against classism. Those are elements that audiences could latch onto, and it does help that both are based on true stories. But yeah, I also think a little of that is missing in The Legend of Bagger Vance. I think the simple fix for that is tying Randolph and Adele's stories together, where instead of Randolph losing himself in the war, you have him lose himself in everything he holds dear in the Great Depression. I think it would have made his character easier to latch onto than the one we got. Not to discount what war could do to a man, but I just feel in this movie that element of it doesn't quite flow with the timeline and fit the story as good as the Great Depression. And it shows. I mean, I wouldn't be talking about this movie if it did as well as the talent it employs. In the end, the movie just goes to show that writing is a huge part of storytelling. No matter how much immense talent you have to work with, you still need strong writing to bring it all together and utilize the talent to its full potential. Anyways, these were just my thoughts and some of what other people thought about The Legend of Bagger Vance. If you made it this far, I appreciate you watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Definitely let me know in the comments below what you think of this new well-watched series, and what you think about The Legend of Bagger Vance. Why do you think it was not a hit?